of leadership, Triangle, and everybody else is in the 2000s and I'm way back in the 1990s, okay? I'd like to welcome you to this session with GoTriangle, and our session today will be, it's a panel discussion with a very large panel here, and I'm going to introduce this panel to you, but I will say that we're so happy to have you here. I will let them know when we have about 5 minutes left, and I hope you enjoy the discussion today. I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Jeff Mann, who is GoTriangle General Manager. Michael Landry here is Raleigh Durham Airport Authority President and CEO. Mr. Bill Bell, former Mayor, City of Durham, and GoTriangle Board member. Mr. Sid Hutchinson, and Sid is the Vice Chairman of Wake County Board of Commissioners, and he's also a member of the GoTriangle Board of Directors. Dr. Lenny, or Dr.? I didn't do that too bad. Assistant Professor, Department of Civil Construction and Environmental Engineering at North Carolina State University. Giancarlo Cifuentes, my Spanish is coming back. Univision Regional News Director, and Thad Austin, Associate Director, Transportation and Parking at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And our moderator will be Mr. Michael
Charbonneau.
Michael Charbonneau, I have a blank. With GoTriangle, he's Director of Marketing and Communication, and I'll turn that over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Diane. Thank you all for coming out here this afternoon, for being a part of this conference, and for coming to our panel discussion today. I think you're in for a treat. We've got a great group up here on the stage, and we're really excited. I am honored to be able to be here and a part of helping facilitate this conversation among this group today. Who we've got up here are some of the great thought leaders and innovators here in the Triangle. Our session that you've come out to today is called We're Growing, Are We Ready for 1 Million Residents? And thanks to the work of this group that you see on stage and a lot of the partners and staff that they have working with them, this is something that our community has been preparing for a long, long time. And when we talk about being prepared for 1 million neighbors, and what we mean by that is this region is actually supposed to grow by that many people over the next couple of decades. And so when we think about another 1 million people in the Triangle, are we ready? The group we have with us today is not only making sure that we're prepared as a region to accommodate that many more people coming in, but that we've got the right investments in place to make sure that we're expanding the opportunities for everyone who lives in Durham, Wake, and Orange counties, all of our communities, opening up opportunities and really expanding those to make them more achievable and reachable to those who depend on transit and those who like to have another way to get around the Triangle other than sitting by themselves in their car in traffic. As Diane said, we have a big group on stage today. Before we get started with questions, I will say that if you've ever tried to put a panel discussion like this together with people like this on stage who have very, very busy schedules, it's very hard to get a group of even 3 or 4 that can all have schedules sync up. When we reached out to all 7 of the people up here and told them what the topic of discussion was today, we immediately heard back from all of them that they wanted to be here and cleared their schedules to be a part of this today. That says a lot about how important this topic of transit and investment is in our community. And it says a lot about this group together, how they're not here just today to talk as a group on this stage, but they're talking behind the scenes, making sure that all these connection points are happening. So with that, we're really excited to get started here today. The way we're going to work is we've got questions for the group. This is going to be an open discussion forum, so we have some questions in advance that I'm going to ask certain members of the group to start us off with, and we'll address them directly, but then we'll be kind of opening it up. So hopefully over the course of the afternoon, all of our panelists will jump in to shared conversation. So as we get into the topic of transit today, first let me say, and this is something you'll hear as we discuss this today, but for those who don't already know, here in the Triangle, we are making a major investment in our transit infrastructure. All 3 of our counties that make up the Triangle, Durham, Orange, and Wake, the voters in each of those counties all approved referendums on the first try to make investments in transit. That is a big deal. There are many places in the country who need major transit infrastructure who don't get referendums like this passed. To have all 3 of our counties go 1, 2, 3 in a row and get them approved is a big deal. The other thing that you'll hear this group talk about as we talk about that topic is that we often talk about projects in one specific county. There's some big projects happening in all three, but this is a regional system, and you'll hear from this group today what that means to have that regional connectivity. Before we get into transit specifically, first I want to talk just a little bit about growth in general with the group here. As we've said, we're one of the fastest growing regions in the country. And so I wanted to start first with Sig Hutchinson and Mayor Bell, either one of you who want to start first. Can you talk to us a little bit today about why we're seeing such rapid growth in our area, what this growth really means, and what are those opportunities and benefits?
Well, Mike, first of all, I think we all would agree we live in probably one of the more desirable areas of the country when you talk about the Triangle area, a place where you've got great universities, quality of life is great, access to highways, airports, rail. I think all of that is part of the attraction. And then it's affordable when you look at other areas of the country. And if you combine that with the fact that our economies have changed over the periods of time, in Durham we've gone from tobacco, textile, furniture, farming into high-tech, city of medicine, city of innovators, entrepreneurs. I think all those tend to be part of the attraction. And it used to be a time that, and I have to speak for Durham in particular, that you didn't hear very positive things said about the city. But over the time, that has changed. We get write-ups in the New York Times and et cetera, all talking about Durham as a place to be. So I think a combination of changing the economy, a very attractive community to live in, access to the beaches, to the mountains, and great universities, all that to me combines to make this a very attractive area. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that happen as the area continues to grow.
So, Mike, thank you. And first, I just need to give a shout out to the man here to my right. 16 years as the mayor of Durham. 26 years as a commissioner before that, 40 years, friends, 40 plus years as an elected official, and he says Durham is the place to be, and Durham is the place to be in large part because of the man right here, right? Let's give it up. Yeah. So, Mike, in many ways, this is not exactly framed right in terms of the title. What are we going to do with 1 million people? Actually, we are 1 million people. What are we going to do with another 1 million people, 2 million people? What are we going to do growing at 67 people a day? Now, friends, there are 3,000 counties in the United States of America. Wake County is number 2 in terms of growth of large counties. Harris County, Austin is number 1. We are number 2. It's 67 people a day. The question is, how can we keep the welcome light on so that we can add that extra million that Mike talked about and still have even a better community than we have today? The mayor mentioned a couple of things. Let me hit 3 things really quickly. Number 1, we're talking about transit. We need a transportation system that works, and we're going to be dropping $5 billion in transit over the next 10 years. That includes 17 miles of light rail into downtown Durham, where it will meet up with a commuter rail. It goes 37 miles through the Triangle, 20 miles of BRT, quadrupling the bus capacity from 17 miles to 73 miles with 15-minute frequencies. So we are going to change in a very, very significant way around transit. Second of all, is education. I mean, we can compete with any place in the world around education. Our great research universities, but also the rest of our colleges that I won't go into, but Wake Tech and our public education, incredible, absolutely incredible. And the third thing that the mayor mentioned briefly, but I always like to talk about, is an incredible quality of life. How many of y'all love living here in Wake County? I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. Durham, sorry. Sorry, Durham. Sorry, Mayor. How many love living in the region? I mean, and it's just fantastic. There's so much to do. The weather's great. The weather's always better here than where you go. You get off the airplane and, man, it was nicer back there in the region where we are, Greenways. Oh, amazing. How many of y'all like our greenways? It's just amazing. Yeah, greenway map. I got a map. So the quality of life makes this such a desirable place to live. And the conversation we need to be about is how are we going to double that size and continue to be even a better place than we are today.
Great. And Giancarlo, I want to bring you into this because we've talked a little about growth in general in the Triangle right now. And in our last census, we saw that the rapid growth in general, we're seeing one of the fastest growing populations is our Spanish-speaking population here in this region. Can you talk to us a little bit about what do you think it is that's making our region attractive and growing our Spanish speakers, as well as in the media you work for, what are those messages and topics that are resonating that you're trying to reach out to your communities and audiences with?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's a pleasure to Univision to be part of this discussion as we grow together in this community. I represent 3 markets, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and Raleigh, and Raleigh being one of the closest to us just for location and to our heart because of the viewers. And it's funny that you mentioned about the million people coming to town and to reside here and live here. And out of those 67 people that are coming to to live here, probably seven are Hispanics. We are talking about in Wake County that approximately it's like 12% of the population is Hispanic. This is 143,000 Hispanics living in Wake County, and for them, it's almost the same needs of other residents of the United States. Job opportunities, better climate, either political or just weather itself. So for the Hispanic communities, being able to find a location or a region where they can come and work and have a good way of being a good way of accessing the roads, the workplaces. In this case, transportation. It's very beneficial when they decide to where they're going to relocate. We have a lot of Hispanics coming from the Northeast because of all the cost living. It's very expensive to live. I lived in New York. It's very expensive for the Hispanics to make a living, and it's already very populated. So the job opportunities are less than in the South. And then you have this in the Southeast. You have Florida and other states that weather-wise is not as attractive as the weather is here in North Carolina and Raleigh. So it's a combination of factors, including that plus the job opportunities. We have a lot of construction opportunities, tourism, you name it, and you have hotels, the restaurant industry. A lot of opportunities of opening jobs in the Hispanic community. We have a lot of professionals too as well that not only come to work, but to come to study to the research universities that you have mentioned. A lot of foreign students come here to be able to grow their careers. So it's a perfect place to be able to live and grow as a professional, grow as a Hispanic, and being able to also contribute because the buying power is tremendously. I mean, we're talking about $4.5 billion that we spent in 2014, with a projection of $7 billion in 2019, just around the corner.
He made a very important point. One thing I should have said early on, this community is a very welcoming community. We're a community that prides ourselves on our diversity. We're almost like a global region for what you see in the Triangle area. And I think that's another important point that sometimes gets overlooked in terms of why people move here. We talk about the resources, the jobs, and et cetera, but by and large, we're a welcoming community, and we appreciate the diversity this community has.
Thank you, Maribel. And speaking of that global connectivity in our growth, so as we've seen our population growth, Michael, we've certainly seen RDU International Airport grow along with them. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the growth and expansion you've seen in service and other projects at the airport?
Sure, thanks, Mike. I guess right now I feel like I'm in the center seat of a long transatlantic flight, and I requested the upgrade, didn't get it, and I requested a window and didn't get it, but deal with it, I guess, as best we can. By the way, thanks, Jeff, for the seat upgrade. Appreciate that very much. So let's talk a little bit about what's been going on at RDU from an air service standpoint over the past 5 years. Past 5 years, we've added 4 new carriers into the mix, 2 ultra-low-cost carriers, Allegiant and Frontier Airlines, not to mention Virgin America and also Alaska Airlines. 10 major carriers in our market right now. In the next 18 months, Alaska Airlines will wind up. They've already acquired Virgin America. They'll become 1 carrier, so we'll go from 10 down to 9, but we'll take 10 for right now, so 10 major carriers. When I started in 2011, we had 37 different nonstop destinations, and today we've got 50 nonstop destinations. During that same period of time, we've added 30 additional flights Some of those 13 new destinations, some are additional capacity in the existing markets, providing additional competition. So that's been some pretty good growth that we've actually had. Other interesting fun facts, because as we continue to grow, and we're really a barometer of what's kind of going on in the local community, so as the folks that are next to me, as they continue to provide great opportunities for people to bring businesses in the local community, our employment levels continue to grow. So you look at 2011, we had about 9 million people that came through RDU, and this past year, we just passed through 11 million people. So about a 22% increase in overall activity, so we continue to grow. As we look to the future, it's pretty bright for us in terms of additional opportunities of nonstop. You're going to see us continue to populate what we call the West Coast. So places like San Diego, Portland, San Jose, those really look like they're in a 24-month period that looks like it's very, very possible. And also down into Florida with Fort Myers really has some pretty good numbers as we're looking towards that. We've also got less than daily service in places like Kansas City and also New Orleans, trying to convince Delta Airlines to provide daily service into those markets, again, providing additional competition. And I think that's probably in an 18-month window. We're also looking at international service, and specifically looking at places like Mexico. So Mexico City, Guadalajara, Puerto Vallarta, did I say that right? Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you for the assistance. And of course, Caribbean service as well. There's been a hurricane that went through and it devastated some of those islands, but Punta Cana, Montego Bay, Nassau, Bahamas. I mean, you just list the number of communities that we're going to reach out to. It's pretty incredible, and it's really a reflection of what's going on in this local community. The other big piece we're going to take a shot at is we're going to go after China service. We really believe there's an opportunity for China service. Most people don't realize that China, we're the second largest in the U.S. Exporter for China. And so we are also the largest state that doesn't have nonstop service into China. So we think there's a tremendous opportunity. I will tell you that the markets over in China, it's very difficult to get into China right now because most of their airports are at capacity. But in the next 5 to 7 years, they will build about 7 new airports. Those airports will be larger than Atlanta. Atlanta is the largest airport in the world. By about 2040, they will have, the Chinese citizens, will be the largest air transportation market in the world, surpassing the United States. There's a tremendous opportunity there. So we want to try to make sure we position this community for that opportunity, and that's probably about a 5 to 7 year lift to get that done. Also, we've just completed our long-term master planning process called Vision 2040. It really looks at the physical infrastructure. What are the things you need in terms of runways, taxiways, and terminals to support long-term growth? What came out of that was about a $2.7 billion investment that we need to figure out how we're going to fund. We will defer $1 billion worth of investments. We'll push it outside a 25-year window. And a lot of it has to do with the federal program that's in place is really insufficient and making it very challenging. We're also going to have to wind up taking on about $900 million worth of debt in order to make that $2.7 billion work. It is a real challenge financially to try to figure out how you make that program work. Some of the big ticket items, we'll spend probably $1 billion on the airfield. The biggest ticket item is going to be our west runway. So if you're in Terminal 2, you look out on the airfield. It's a 10,000 footer. We're going to take it to 11.5. That 11.5 will allow us to reach literally anywhere in the world, and specifically China. So we're trying to position ourselves for that. We're also going to have to build probably an additional 23 gates in a 25-year time frame, 19 in Terminal 2 and another 4. The math works out correctly. Someone help me? Yes, 23 it works. And 4 more in Terminal 1. So quite a bit of activity. We're also going to be looking at ground transportation, and that's going to be important to us as well. Right now, we have insufficient curb space to handle all the ground transportation coming to the facility. And we'll talk a little bit later about some of the things, the initiatives that Jeff and I that we're working on, try to improve that overall experience. But one thing I'll be a proponent for is 24/7, 365 operations at the airport. Most people don't realize this, but we kick off our day at 3:30 in the morning, and the last flight lands about 1 o'clock in the morning. So we are a 24-hour operation, and so we really, in order to serve all of our customers, we really need to have 24-hour operations. So that's my first plug for it, and I'll plug again. So anyway, that's it. Thanks, Mike.
Well, thank you. And with that, we want to turn and start delving a little bit more specifically into transit and the investment in transit. And we'll talk about some of the specific projects, and I want to bring Eleni and Than, our other panelists, in for that part of the conversation. But to start us off there, so our general manager, Jeff Mann. Jeff, can you talk to a little bit to this group about, when we've talked about the growth, we've talked about the investments, what does all this growth and change mean for GoTriangle and our partners in the services that we provide and where we're headed?
Sure.
Thanks, Mike. And appreciate the opportunity to be here and present to the group with this great panel. We have historically underinvested in the Triangle Region Transit. We know that. You can look at our peer cities that we compete with for new jobs and industry. If you look at Austin and Portland and Seattle, those are communities where when you're flying to Seattle or you're flying to Washington, D.C. or Northern Virginia, you don't want a car. A car is a burden, right? So you know you can get where you need to go on the metro system or whatever transit's in place. That's not true here. And Michael, I hear it all the time. I flew into the airport and I was looking for the bus and I saw there was one coming in a half hour, but I couldn't wait a half hour, so I took an Uber, I took a Lyft or whatever else, I rented a car. We have got to invest in transit in this community so we can continue to compete not only nationally but internationally for jobs and maintain the quality of life we've enjoyed. You know, I commute, when I'm not taking the bus, I commute on 540 and 40, and that's not a lot of fun. You've all done it. You've been out there. Now, if we don't leave the office at 4:30 or 4:15, you're in gridlock, and it takes you an hour to get to Raleigh or even more sometimes. And 540 starts stacking up at 3:45, 4 o'clock. We have to invest in options if we're going to be competitive. We simply cannot not invest. That's the bad news. So the good news is we have a transit tax that's passed in all 3 counties, and you mentioned that. And Sig, you talked about the Wake County Transit Plan, which will dramatically increase transit services in Wake County. Just to give you an idea, and Sig, I think you said this, but today, if you were to look for a frequent bus network, 15-minute service is only on 17 miles of corridor. Only 17 miles of corridor within Wake County where a bus comes every 15 minutes. That's going to increase to actually 83 over the next 10 years. So more than tripling the bus service. We're building over 20 miles of BRT, bus rapid transit, on 4 new corridors to give people a lot more options in those areas. And a 37-mile commuter rail line, which will really serve as the spine, linking the region together, Durham County, Wake County, and eventually west into Orange County and perhaps Alamance, and east into Johnson and north up to Wake Forest. So all of these investments are contemplated in the transit plans in Durham and Orange and of course, the light rail system that will link in downtown Durham. So if you think about what we've got to do to accommodate the growth that we're talking about, we've got to build the system that's envisioned, working with all of our partners, and we can do that. We're confident we can do that. The light rail project is moving forward. It's in the engineering phase of the federal process. We hope to get a full funding grant agreement in 2019. That'll be transformative to Durham and Orange counties. Once it links to commuter rail at a true multimodal hub in downtown Durham, which we will have by the transit center, and then Raleigh Union Station, a true multimodal hub here, we can truly link the triangle with 2 world-class multimodal hubs with a very fast and efficient and safe commuter rail system, a state-of-the-art light rail system, and it will allow us to manage its growth and maintain quality of life. If we don't do that, I don't know how we continue to compete.
Excellent. So let's take a few minutes to break down some of these transit investments county by county, and then we'll bring it back together regionally. Starting with, Jeff was just talking about Durham and Orange County. We touched in the beginning of the discussion a little bit about the investment there. So 2011, voters in Durham County voted for a transit investment, a half-cent sales tax. The next year, Orange County residents did the same. Those 2 investments are currently being used to make major infrastructure and investments in public transportation throughout both counties. Better bus service, more frequent bus service, better bus stops for citizens in both counties and the region, as well as the big project that you've heard some of our panelists discuss, the 17.7-mile light rail line from UNC hospitals at one end to North Carolina Central University at the other, 18 stops, including stopping at UNC, at Duke, in downtown Durham. We're talking about 3 major hospitals, Duke, UNC, and the Durham VA Hospital, all directly on the line. The 3 major universities, Duke, UNC, North Carolina Central, as well as 3 of the largest employers in the state of North Carolina, right in that corridor. It's a major investment. It's a big project. Mayor Bell, you've obviously been involved for a long, long time in your community with the transit investments in the light rail project specifically. Talk to us a little bit about why that project is so important to Durham and Orange counties.
Well, I think we've all talked about, we aren't building today. We're trying to plan for what we want this region to look like 10, 15, 20 years from now. And that's what the whole piece about the light rail is concerned about, the commuter rail, bus rapid transit. As Mike indicated, I was I guess I was the original member of TTA, and we've gone through some challenges in getting us to the point of where we are. But when we talk about wanting to maintain the quality of life that we have now, we want the quality of life to be the same 10, 15, 20 years from now, even better. And transportation is key to it. I mean, you just talked about, I'm going to leave here in probably another half an hour or so trying to go back to Durham, getting on 40. I don't know if I'm going to leave it. I might leave at 6 o'clock rather than trying to leave at 4 o'clock. But the point is, we're seeing today what this region could look like 5, 10, 20 years from now if we don't address the transportation needs. We have to have alternative forms of transportation. We know autonomous vehicles are coming, but it's still a car and a road. What we're trying to do is get as many people as much of an option as possible to get out of the cars, to get on to some other means of transportation. Commuter rail provides for that, bus rapid transit provides for that, and light rail provides for that. But again, you've got to have that vision, and there are challenges, and we know we got a lot of naysayers as we go through this project. But again, what you got to remember, we're not talking about today, we're not talking about 2 or 3 years from now, we're talking about 10, 15, 20 years from now, what we want this region to look like, and transportation is going to be key. You've got to have a mode that's going to be available to all people that, again, that need it to get to jobs, to get to entertainment, to just move around, and that's why we've been so involved in trying to make this happen.
Excellent. And Than, I know that obviously...
Mike, if I could just note, it's also an economics thing. If you have a lot of folks, the average cost to own an automobile in North Carolina is over $9,000 a year, and that's all in. That's payment, it's maintenance, it's fuel. If we can have folks that maybe have a household income of $50,000, if we can have transit available to them where they can go from a 2-car household to a 1-car household, we can take 25% of their income, put it back in their pocket to spend on other things. So it's also an affordability issue having a strong transit network within the region, not just to move people about, but access to jobs without having to have an automobile is a critical element that drives it.
Absolutely. And Than, I want to bring you in now because obviously working with transportation down around UNC Hospital and the university in general, we know that's one of the busiest places in the entire Triangle region for transit as it is right now today. As we talk about bringing in our first rail project to the region and we talk about enhancing bus, there are some who've raised questions about, can we just put more buses to the university and to the hospital? Talk to us a little bit about what you see already day to day with transit and what opportunities are there.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one that we hear a lot, so I appreciate you asking it. I've spent the better part of my life, the last 4 years, working on the light rail project. It's a critically important project for us. We have 3 of the light rail stations will be on university property and 1 will be adjacent to it. So it'll have a big impact on us. That said, it's not the only thing that we're working on. And I spent a lot of my time trying to explain to folks that this isn't a binary choice. It's not an either or with light rail and bus. It's really kind of an all of the above for us. So Mike mentioned we're a very large employer in the region. When I talk about UNC today, I'm talking about UNC and UNC Healthcare. If you've been over there, we're all one campus. So combined, we have about 20,000 employees on the main campus every day, which is a huge number. What we know is that only about 1/3 of those people live in Chapel Hill or Charbonneau. So 2/3 of the people are commuting into campus. So I'm not only the president of Hair Club for Men, I'm also a member. I live in Wake County, and I take the bus to Chapel Hill every day, and it works great. So there are a lot of people like me that are making these same sorts of choices. So we know that number that live in Chapel and Charbonneau, it's already small, but we actually know it's getting smaller. And we actually know that the distance that our employees are traveling to campus is getting longer. So it's an issue that we've been grappling with for some time now. The other misconception that I try to clear up is our folks are not just coming from Durham and Wake counties. We have a large percentage of our employees coming from Alamance County, from Chatham County. It's only going to grow in a great way from Chatham County. So we're working on a number of different initiatives to try to get all of our folks here. You may remember 15, 20 years ago, UNC started a major building and construction program. And part of that was we have an agreement with the town where we limited the parking on campus. And so we started a number of initiatives to try to provide viable and meaningful options for people to get to campus that didn't involve driving in their car by themselves. So we currently have about 61% of our employees who drive alone to campus every day, which if you compare that to other major employers in the region, it's a very low number. About 25% of our employees either take transit or park and ride transit combination, which is great. But we're always looking for more opportunities. So in addition to working on the light rail, which Mayor Bell said it's a future project, it's not helping today's needs, we're also working on a lot of different initiatives. So last year, for example, the university has entered into contracts with 2 other regional transit providers aside from GoTriangle. So we now have contracts with PART from Alamance County and also with Chatham Transit. So we are working to provide those options. We're also working on emerging technologies and evolving services like Uber and Lyft, which is huge for college students. We know autonomous vehicles are coming. We're not sure how that's going to impact our campus and impact our infrastructure, but we're working on it. So we have this huge toolbox of different transit tools that we're working on. Light rail is one of them. Bus service is another one. We kind of look at them all together as a way to kind of make things work.
Before we start talking some about Wake specific and then bring it back regionally, any of our panelists have anything else they want to say on the topic of the Durham and Orange?
Well, I would just note everything you said, Dan, absolutely true, but it's also a capacity issue on UNC campus as well. As a matter of fact, it's probably hard to believe, but there's a bus every 42 seconds in front of UNC hospitals at rush hour. And so there is a capacity component as well, and that's why the fixed guideway like light rail will bring that new.
Right, I should have said that. We have capacity issues on campus, but also in the major roads leading to campus. So the 54 corridor between I-40 and UNC campus, if you've ever tried to go down there or leave there in the early morning or afternoon, it's nearly impossible. The buses get stuck in it today. It's a huge issue. So we do have limited options.
So let's talk a little bit about Wake briefly, and then I want to bring Dr. Bardacca, who's been very patient waiting to talk about some of the next aspects of these. But we've talked about the investment in Durham and Orange. So 11 and 12, then just this past November, a little more than a year ago, Wake County residents approved their investment in transit. Sig, you were involved for a long time leading up to that vote, and since it's happened and the implementation's begun, talk to us a little bit about the importance of the Wake Transit Plan.
Obviously, it's hugely important. Many of you may not know we're collecting now $94 million a year, which is going towards our 10-year transportation plan. There's a couple of things that I want to mention quickly, Mike, that I think really ties into this conversation. In the past, we've typically thought about transportation corridors as we think about transportation. I think the new way of thinking about it is more around mobility. Whereas we think about interconnectivity of modes, so that sidewalks connect to bike lanes, that connect to greenways, that connect to transit, that ultimately connect to destinations where people want to go. There's also all types of technologies that are going to be playing into this, such as Uber or Lyft or bike share, or a lot of technologies that we don't even know what it is. So, and then the platform that you have here in your smartphone should be able to dial in a point-to-point mobility solution. So and it may include, a bike share, and it may include a light rail and a commuter rail, all of which you pay for right here, and it maps out your whole route. So that's the first thing, is this is completely changing the way that we think about transportation, and clearly this Wake Transit Plan fits into that in a very big way. The other thing that I think deserves to be said is how this impacts the health of our communities. And of course, this is something that's very much of interest to me, in that Jeff talked about these social determinants or the cost of transportation. So when we start thinking about the determinants of health, the cost of transportation is a huge component of that. And if you can put more money in people's pocket, what we find is they do a better job of taking care of themselves and their kids and their families from a health perspective. The other, though, big determinant of health is housing. And that's the thing that hasn't been mentioned today. But if you can handle affordable housing on a transit line, then you can handle the two biggest social determinants. And if you can start putting housing cost at less than 30% of a household income and taking down transit cost to less than 10% of a household income, friends, you can go a huge way at creating a healthy community for us all.
And that is a perfect turning point and opportunity to bring in Dr. Eleni Bardacca from NC State University, who's associate professor. And Eleni, I know your research focuses a great deal on exactly the kinds of things that Sig was just talking about when we look at expanding these transit systems, what does affordable housing look like? How do we make sure we're growing in the right way? Can you tell this group today a little bit about some of your research, what you do, and how that's pertinent to what we're all doing here today?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for inviting me to this discussion. So I would like to start by talking a little bit about what happened in other cities that experienced similar transit investments and see how we can learn from that. So most U.S. cities followed pretty closely the traditional transit-oriented development model, which is about developing high-density housing, imagine apartments with at least 4 floors, right next to transit, very close to transit stations. So most cities followed that model, and what happened is with this brand new apartments close to such a valuable asset like transit is that their prices were very high. And this also started changing the neighborhood character. And the older housing stock, the people who were owners of that housing started thinking about renovating their units, also matched these prices. So for all kinds of reasons, we saw this increase in property values in those areas. And there have been over 100 studies on this topic. And of course, the results change by region, but if we want to talk about an average estimate, we saw a 10% increase in land or property values on average across the country, and across those large transit corridors, on average again, which means that in certain areas the impacts were much higher if we're just talking about a 10% on average. And I don't think that a 10% is low to begin with. So that was the property value side. Now the question is what happened to the people in these areas. And for some reason, researchers did not start asking this question 30 years ago when they start studying property values, but they started asking this question 5 years ago. I don't really know why. But what we saw in these areas is a significant increase in median household income, a significant increase in educational attainment. And unless, because of transit, everybody got better jobs and everybody got degrees because of transit, this direction of the change means that there was an influx of higher income households in these areas and an influx of people of highly educated people. And so because of this neighborhood change, these neighborhoods became even more attractive to higher income households that not only wanted to be there because of transit, but also because, oh, this is a great neighborhood with other higher income individuals like me. And so because of these self-reinforcing changes, neighborhoods in cities like Denver and Portland started gentrifying. So I don't have to explain what this meant for the lower income households in these areas. I think we all understand that. But since this did not really work for those who really need transit, did it work for transit agencies? I don't think so. The studies showed that people who live in transit-oriented development areas are actually much more likely to use transit, 5 to 6 times more than the people who do not. So this sounds great, but if we look at, on average, who uses transit, that's 3 to 4% of the population. So even in the cases that people chose to live right on transit, only 20% of them, approximately, actually use transit. Now, do we have a more improved model than the traditional TOD model? We do. It's about affordable housing. We call that equitable transit-oriented development when we're trying to place mixed-income housing and low-income housing very close to transit. What this means for the lower-income households, again, I do not have to mention that we all understand that we will see less economic displacement because of that in those areas. But what does it mean for transit agencies? Again, I did some research in Denver, where they do have a lot of affordable housing close to transit. And I compare the travel behavior of the residents that live in low-income housing units and those that live in market rate units, apartment units. And I saw that 18% of the people who live in market rate units commute by transit, compared to 70%, 70 of the residents of low-income housing. This is a huge difference. And I think when we talk about low-income housing, we have to keep that perspective in mind. It's not just about the people, it's also for the financial sustainability of transit agencies. So what do we need to do to bring affordable housing close to transit? The first thing I think we need is inclusionary zoning. Cities like Boston, Atlanta, all the major cities in California, they have inclusionary zoning requirements. This means that in Atlanta and Boston, when the transit agency partners with a developer to build housing, they say 20% of the housing units are going to be low income. In California, that requirement is 35%. So we need that. We need that here. The second thing is that we need a fund specifically for transit-oriented development, equitable transit-oriented development. I will bring again the example of Denver, where they have a $24 million TOD fund, specifically for affordable housing. And how they did that, the city contributed, the housing authorities contributed, the Denver Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Gates Foundation, major banks in the area, they all contributed to this fund for affordable housing. So we need to bring foundations in these discussions. We have strong foundations in North Carolina, and we need to explain to them why it is so important for them to contribute to such a cause. The third and the last thing I would like to emphasize is I honestly applaud Wake County for putting together an affordable housing plan and a transit plan. But these plans right now, they're in two separate documents. I think we need to coordinate housing efforts and transit efforts. We need to go and see which areas are going to be impacted the most by these transit investments. Which areas are the most vulnerable? Prioritize housing in these areas. So we need integrated solutions across housing and transportation. Thank you.
I know this is a topic that's important to everyone that's doing this growth expansion. Any other thoughts from your panels on this investment?
Well, I would just say on her point, the other advantage of doing light rail, you've got a defined corridor. And again, when we're talking about for future years, it gives the development community an idea as to where they can look for development. And that's very important. And the issue about affordable housing is very, very important. But until we get a change in the General Assembly, it's highly unlikely we're going to get anything like inclusionary zoning. That's a big issue. And unless we get a change there, you're not going to make that happen in North Carolina.
I might say that this whole conversation around transportation is just as much about land use as it is about transportation. It's two sides of the same coin. So I loved your comments about the integration of affordable housing and transportation. Wake County, in the next quarter, is about to do a comprehensive land use plan. First time we've updated our land use plan in 10 years. And within that document, that's going to start tying together land use planning, transportation planning, and affordable housing, all look through a lens of how it can improve the health of our communities.
And we should say specifically on the Wake Transit side, I know we talked about some of the specifics of the light rail project, but for those who don't know, the Wake plan includes more than tripling the existing level of bus service, bus rapid transit corridors, Jeff mentioned 20 miles of them that will have some of that dedicated space as they look at land use, as well as a 37-mile commuter rail line that will run from Garner all the way out to Durham with stops at NC State, Raleigh, Morrisville, Cary, out along the way. So lots of projects happening in both counties, both rail and bus. I want to turn, we just talked some about the housing component, and I want to talk about another important thing related to transit, and that's obviously job creation and retention. This summer, Amazon made big news, talking about relocating a second headquarters site, looking for a location for that. I know many people on this stage, as well as many people out here, have been involved in having the Triangle be one of those areas that was considered for that. Among the things that Amazon was looking for was a good quality of life for its employees, a good talent pool of workers to pull from, as well as a major focus on transportation, both access to good transit lines in and out for their employees, as well as close proximity to a major international airport that could get them to major cities throughout the US and throughout the world. I'm going to open this one up in general for the whole panel, but could you talk with us all a little bit today about why you think that the Triangle region could be so attractive for a company like Amazon or another similar company to locate here, given what we have and what we're investing in for the future?
Mike, I'll start by just covering the transportation part of that. And many of you may know Amazon, New York Times wrote an article when Amazon was searching for, or as they were searching for a second headquarters, perhaps on the East Coast, and they ranked what cities may be on the short list for that And Raleigh-Durham dropped off due to a lack, in that article by New York Times, dropped off due to a lack of a public transit network. We've passed a transit tax. We have a good story to tell in Durham, Orange, and Wake counties, and we clearly have a much better story to tell than if we didn't have that funding mechanism, but we have historically underinvested. And unless we have mobility and unless we provide options to I-40 and 540 and 54 and the other major arteries, we're not going to be able to compete for an Amazon's or any other company that wants to come to our region if other communities have those transit investments in place. So I think it's absolutely critical for mobility that we have a well-functioning transit network and a well-functioning highway network. So it all works and the international airport and connectivity to the airport. Mike, to your point, I heard you loud and clear on the 24-hour service. Would love to get there. It's a network issue. If we bring one route to 24/7, we have to have connectivity between that route and other routes. And also in the Wake plan, we have dedicated shuttle service to and from the airport to commuter rail. So we have to think about how we connect that airport into the broader network. But unless we have a well-functioning network where connectivity is provided at our multimodal hubs, I worry about our ability to compete, and again, 10 and 20 years down the road as we continue to grow.
I think, like you were saying, everything is going to come down to infrastructure, because as you know, Atlanta is also bidding for the headquarters of having Amazon in the city, and some of the things that Atlanta is it's already able to provide on their portfolio. I guess it's infrastructure, major airport, and Marta has stepped up too. Marta is our public transit transportation system, and they also have stepped up to the plate throughout the last 2 decades. They've been doing a lot of changes for the riders and the community that takes public transportation, to be able to connect them from the airport to the major venues, whether it's the Mercedes Stadium and other top major places that people need to do either for work or for tourism. So infrastructure is going to be key, and I think if Amazon makes the right choice, RDU can be a potential place for having their headquarters, just because of the technology that it's here, all the companies that are coming to the region to invest here. IKEA, Rooms to Go already, they have the vision of investing in the region, and strategically it will be very convenient because they have the I-95, major highway coming from New York City to Florida. So it's just, I guess, stepping up to the plate and being able to, provide the infrastructure that they need.
I'll jump in here real quickly. Why do I think Amazon likes this location? 3 things: talent, talent, talent. It's the horsepower of those universities which really drives, I think, their interest to want to be here. The other thing is, I've read some national articles about transit as potentially the Achilles heel. I don't see it that way. I see it actually as a strength for our region. The reason why is because if you look at other communities, they've already started to develop out their network and what it needs to look like. I believe Amazon wants to come to a community and wants to grow with the community. Remember, they're not going to dump 50,000 employees on the first day. I mean, I think it starts at 2,000, it starts ramping up, and so they want to come, they want to grow, and so you now have referendums, you now have a system in place, you now have leadership in place to lead this effort in terms of visionary, putting the transit in place as they grow. They can grow with us. So I really think it's a strength and not a weakness at the end of the day.
So, Mike, you talk about talent. Credit Suisse, 4 months ago, announced 1,200 new jobs here in the region. Infosys announced 2,000 new jobs. We had 4,600 jobs total in Wake County announced. And what we found is 80% of those jobs will be hired from right here in the Triangle because they know the talent is here. And as my good friend Jim Captain with Credit Suisse says, he says, see, they don't have to know what we do. They just have to be smart enough to be able to do the work. We can teach them what we do. And Wake Tech can be clearly a partner in helping make that happen. But if we bring all those people here and don't have the mobility and the quality of life that comes from affordable housing along transit corridors and transit-oriented development, it's going to become so crowded, it's going to look like Atlanta, and people are not going to want to live here anymore. So it ultimately all fits together.
Excellent. So we talked about wanting to recruit jobs and talent and also retain. I love the conversation up here about our colleges and universities. We obviously know we have some of the best universities, colleges, great community college systems, 3 in the Triangle alone, great public school networks and other schools that feed up to those, and a lot of work going on in this community right now to connect all of those elements of education and transportation moving forward. I want to turn to our 2 university representatives. So Dan and Eleni, talk to us a little bit about, with what you see right now, the students and staff that are there, the graduate students that are coming in from all over the world. How important is this investment in transit and transportation in our region if we want to retain those folks that you're teaching and working with at the universities right now and have them stay here and work for some of these great companies that are coming in?
It's everything. Yeah, I mean, we recruit and maintain. It's a competitive process just like any other major employer. I met a colleague from William Peace University here. He's probably got the same issue that we have. There's an old paradigm with universities that it's all about parking, right? You hire a new professor and they may ask about their lab space, they may ask about their whatever, but the first thing they're going to ask about is their parking. But we've seen that paradigm shifting, and I think it's shifting for good, and we're able to respond to it. I was talking to a new graduate student recently, and she was accepted at a number of really high-quality institutions in the country. And she told me that one of the major factors that she went through when she was making her decision about where to go to grad school was where could she go that would allow her to live car-free. So she chose here. She investigated it. She looked at our transit. She chose here. She lives in Carborough. And so I think that sort of thing is happening more and more. And we hear about it a lot with millennials, and it's not just millennials. It's people of all ages and all different backgrounds that are choosing transit because it works for them for any variety of different reasons. But for us, as a major university and a major healthcare system, it's absolutely critical in recruiting and maintaining high-quality employees, which are the lifeblood of kind of what we do. It's not just about getting people to the university, it's promoting the mission of the university, which is a much kind of larger effort for us.
Yeah, so I wanted to focus more on how we can keep the human capital in the Triangle region. So I have to say that most famous urban economists agree with you guys when you say human capital and education is the #1 thing that makes cities successful. Lots of cities have tried to build their way through success with infrastructure. It doesn't work this way. It is human capital it was Stanford University that made Silicon Valley so successful, and their great weather, of course. And we have both here. And because we have this, that's why we do need transit investments to come and help with the growth we're facing. So when someone tries to decide if they are going to stay in the region, it's like they're solving this maximization problem in their head, and we all try to maximize our utility. That's what economists say. And we want quality of life, but we also want great employment opportunities. And transit comes with a quality of life. Now, transit also impacts employment opportunities, and the better transit system we have, more employers will want to move here. For employers, it is a productivity gain to have better transportation because they can access a bigger pool of people. So I think transit directly and indirectly really impacts the talent we can keep in this area.
I think we're going to continue with questions, but I just wanted to pause here for a second. I think this is really exciting, and why I was especially excited about this group that came together, because I think the questions we get as we go out in the community and ask questions about our transit investments is we hear a lot about education, and we hear a lot about affordable housing and job growth and connectivity, and I hope it's becoming clear that among this group up here that that's something that factors into all of that this group is not talking about building a transit line in isolation or doing one infrastructure project in isolation, but this is a community focus. We're all in this together, and this panel is a great representation of the innovative thought leaders from our community who are sitting down every day to have these conversations and connectivity and make sure that they are all coming back together. So with that, I do want to move on ways. We talk about connectivity. So Jeff and Mike have already talked a little bit about the airport and transit, and I want to have the two of you discuss that a little more. And maybe starting with Jeff, if you could just sort of share with this group, because I know it was important for in the Wake Transit Plan and some of these investments with those questions that come in about can we get to the airport via transit, that one of those first investments that came from that voter-approved referendum was to make sure we had more service going out there.
Right, thanks, Mike. So on August 6th, we added additional frequencies to our Route 100 that runs from the Regional Transit Center directly to the airport and down Hillsborough Street by NC State and to downtown where it connects with other routes at Raleigh Station. It was the first investment that we made, GoTriangle, from proceeds from the Wake County tax. That's worked well. What I've heard loud and clear from Mike in our conversations previously and today, he needs more service than even what we provide now, a bigger span of service. Early morning, 3 a.m. We don't start that route at 3 a.m. today. It's more like 5:30 or 6. And we'll work with the airport to find a way to do that. But as we look long-term, beyond Route 100 and our existing bus network, I know the Vision 2040 plan has a ground transportation center for both terminals that will route those buses through the airport much more efficiently than we do today because they're in mixed traffic, and Mike can tell you more about that. But remember, the Wake County plan that we've talked about and the Durham and Orange plan are 10-year plans. So I think we have to think out in the future. 10 years in my industry is like tomorrow. It really is. When we talk about long range, we talk about 30 to 50 years. So I think we have to work closely with the airport and all of our partners to think what's beyond a 10-year plan. And the 10-year plan, of course, is the light rail system, commuter rail, the 21 miles of BRT, and tripling existing bus service. That's a lot. SIG mentioned $5 billion of investment, including the federal match amount. In the Triangle community over the next 10 years, that's $500 million a year, obviously. That's a huge investment, but what comes after that? The proceeds continue to come in from the tax. It doesn't sunset in any of the 3 counties. So we have to think long-term, how do we better link the airport? In the first 10 years, the commuter rail will have a direct linkage to the airport, which will provide much better connectivity than what we have today. But ultimately, we can't only think about the first 10 years. We got to think about what's in the next that next 10-year period and the following 10-year period as well.
Yeah, I think for RDU, what we try to make sure is we have a good working relationship with GoTriangle because we truly believe there's an opportunity there for us in terms of that connectivity. It's interesting, most people might not realize this, but in 1998, there was a 5% sales tax that was put on rental cars. That's generated about $105 million that went towards public transportation since 1998 as a result of operations at RDU. In the conversations with Jeff, I've invited him to a leadership meeting we're going to have with all the corporate managers and tenant owners, have them to come in and talk about transit. Why? Most people don't realize we have 4,300 employees, not RDU. We have about 300 employees. We have 4,300 people that have parking passes at RDU. On a daily basis, we have 1,400 transactions that are individuals in cars, single cars. One of the things I told my staff is I want to figure out a way to try to figure out how we reduce the footprint of what that parking is availability and try to figure out how do we encourage public transportation. One of the challenges we face is most of the workers that come when we open the facility in the morning, it's 3:30 in the morning when they have to be there, which means they're probably on the road between 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the morning to get to the airport. Right now, because we don't have 24-hour operation, you're limited if you have a car, you can work at RDU. That's not a very big applicant pool for this community. And so we're trying to encourage all these different business owners that don't you want to make an investment in this transit and encourage the use of public transportation. And again, trying to encourage Jeff for a 24-hour operation because, again, my last flight of the night comes in at 1 o'clock in the morning. So it's really a 24/7. And, of course, it's got to build out a network. We get that. But I think what you're starting to see is Jeff and I are in constant dialogue, communicating back and forth about how do we continue to expand that network and make that connection into RDU. And I believe the first phase of that low-hanging fruit is all the employees we have there that are going back and forth on a day-to-day basis and driving on all those roads.
So you mentioned something about 24-hour service?
Yeah, I said something about that
something
somewhere,
about
didn't I? 24-hour service.
I did see a hand go up. I think I've got a couple more questions I want to get through, but I think we'll have time for a few questions. If you can hold them for just a second, we'll try to bring those in as well. I did want to ask this, so as we build out these investments, the team that I work with and lead, one of our big roles and responsibilities is education and awareness. In all 3 counties right now, we're trying to make sure we're building awareness of what exists today, that people have this service they can take advantage of today. That we are investing in the future, and we want people to know about these plans, what's in their plans that they approved, And as time goes on, we want to make sure we are being transparent and proactive in sharing where that investment is going. And then we also want to make sure we're engaging the community. There's lots of opportunity for public input. Public input drives a big part of all the 3 transit plans in all the counties. And so as we do that, having sessions like this really gives us an opportunity to talk to lots of different groups who want to share materials out and continue that communication goal. Giancarlo, your media groups here, Univision and the groups you support, have been among those that have covered transit in this area quite a bit. And I'm just interested for the panel group and for the folks out here, what kinds of information are people looking for? How can we as a community do a better job of making sure we're communicating the right information and how this all ties together so that you're able to share it out as well?
Well, we have been covering everything that has been happening with the referendum, and then when the referendum got approved, and all these 10-year projects. This is information that we are giving to our viewers because we want them to be part of this region and the community. It's for them and for our viewers. It's very important to be involved. We recently ran a story about the public forum that was the public forum that was created to organize, to be able to let the viewers and the residents know about the things that were coming down to the options that we're going to be having available for the community, including all these new projects for the public transportation. And for the Hispanic viewers, it takes a little longer for them to click, just because they, on their own, they're trying to assimilate to the whole mainstream society of the region, and so for them, it takes a little longer to be able to be more active and engaged. And we, as a television station, we're trying to always try to encourage them to be involved, not only in this type of information opportunities and things that are going on in the region, but also for voting and knowing who the candidates are for different elections, municipal elections, and statewide and nationally too. But it's just the factor that is very crucial for you guys to be able to get to them. It's the trust factor. They need to trust the information, and they need to make sure that the information comes from a source that is credible. So in this case, for us, it's easier to be able to help them understand what's going on in their market, because it gets to the point, and this is just to have a couple of anecdotes from Atlanta and here in Raleigh. They come to us to tell them, what school should I take my kids to, or what bank should I put my money into? And this is things that we don't even understand how can they, trust us so much for us to be able to let them know what bank they should use, or what school the kids need to go to. But it's just because they associate to us as being able to speak to them in their own language. So I guess one of the key things that you guys and I know you're in the right track, and I like Mr. Bell welcoming the Hispanic community in the region, is that there needs to be more information in Spanish. And I liked that what I've seen from the literature that you guys are providing, and from the surveys that you guys are providing to the community, because that's the first step to be able for them to feel welcome, to feel trusted, to feel engaged. And then we, taking it to the next level is being able to just for them to, I guess, for all these entities that are in the region to participate more in Hispanic events that we create, and we as a station are part of it, just to be able to grow together with our viewers. Our viewers are very loyal. So again, I mean, once we tell them this is something that is good for you, they're going to trust us, because they come for us for immigration topics, legal topics. Everything they come to us to make sure that they're on the right path. And that's why we've been so successful as a television station. And one of the reasons why they use the public transportation too is because they feel more secure. They don't have to, show up an ID, show up a driver's license. They don't have to, risk driving from point A to point B. So all of these things for the community, it's an easier way for them to be able to live in the region, being able to work in the region, and at the same time feel safe and feel secure. And the more welcoming we can be with them, the more they're going to be able to, use the benefits, the services, and at the same time, place some roots here and buy homes and open up businesses and, have the kids into college. And the buying power, I'm telling you, it's tremendous. I mean, the Hispanic community, I was doing a research that the Hispanic community, if they were a country on their own, they will be the 7th largest country in the world. The buying power of that, it's unbeatable. So for us, if you're looking into long-term investment and providing the services for the Hispanic community, 2024, I think we're going to be spending $10 billion. And that's money that, it's available for the market, and then as a region, I guess you want to keep it into the region. So again, just more Spanish information, more approach to them, more engagement into these public events to the Hispanic community. That's going to be key for our communities and for our loyal viewers.
And we appreciate your coverage and all you've done to share information, as well as other partners. Capital Broadcasting here in the room has been very instrumental in helping keep our community informed about all these investments. And so we appreciate all that the Goodman family and Capital Broadcasting do to keep that conversation going as well. We have a few minutes left. We want to take a couple of questions.
We do. We have about 10 minutes left, so we're going to try to get some questions. So if you be straight to the point.
For me to get to a bus station, I need to be on a city street that links to a state road, to a county road, to get to Creedmoor Road, where my nearest bus station is. Can you talk about the role of North Carolina as a state and how they're involved in these discussions and how supportive they are? Is that an absent partner?
Looks like a Jeff question.
So I think you bring up a great point. That's accessibility to the transit network. We have a long ways to go there. We do work very closely with the state, and where there are new projects, there are sidewalk requirements that weren't there years ago to put the type of investment in place that allows accessibility to the transit stops. But not only accessibility to the transit stops, but the transit stops themselves, we have to improve, and we'll continue to improve, and the new funding mechanisms will help us. But working with the state, they have a shared goal of improving those assets, and I think going forward we'll have better accessibility to the transit network. It is not accessible in many cases today because there are so many parties involved, as you mentioned. Clearly an area that's deficient that we have to improve on, and we'll continue working with our partners to improve as money allows.
I think that's a great question, and it gets to this mobility thing and its last mile connectivity. So one of the things that we're doing at GoTriangle is that we're providing an Uber connection, so you can actually schedule an Uber ride from the end of your bus stop. So this is, that first mile, that last mile, if you could do an Uber or a Lyft that then connects you to the transit stop, but all done on your phone seamlessly, that can begin to help deal with some of these mobility issues.
Questions?
So first I want to say thank you for the planning and the work that you're doing for the 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. I'm excited to be in the Triangle and to work and play and live in a more connected way. My question is related to what happens from now until those 5 years. We're already seeing the growth. We're already seeing the shift happen so quickly, so rapidly. How are we shifting how are we more mobile before we can kick in those long-term plans to work on that accessibility and connectivity?
There are tactical plans, which are short-term. There are strategic plans, which are much longer-term. I can speak for Durham in particular. We recognize the issue about affordability in terms of housing. So what we're trying to do, wherever possible, make use of public lands, particularly in downtown, which will lower the cost to do that type of affordable housing development. We understand also that you're going to have to put local dollars into it if developers are going to come in and try to make those type of investments. We're trying to be much more sensitive to our bus routes in terms of how people get from point A to point B, and that goes through what we're doing with Go Durham and GoTriangle. So we realize that there are some immediate issues that we need to address, and we're trying to do that as best we can. But again, it's long term that we're probably looking a lot further. And I think the reason we keep talking about long term, you've got to give people a vision to let them know what you're planning. You know, you can't suddenly come up and say, 10 years from now, this is what we're going to do. They want to know now what is the plan for 10 years from now, but meanwhile also try to address those immediate issues you're talking about in terms of how you get from one place to another and deal with the issues of affordability.
I would just add to that, there will be bus improvements each year, and we have already introduced new service on August 6th with our partners. Go Raleigh did as well, Go Cary did. Orange County and Durham County improvements have taken place with the bus network. So we realize the immediate need. There's a bus implementation plan that will be complete early next year, probably between February and April, that will guide the bus investments in Wake County and when they come online and the regional services over the next 5 to 10 years. So we're not waiting 10 years to bring these things online. The BRT network will take time. The CRT, the commuter rail transit network, will probably take the better part of 10 years before we can open for revenue service. But we're not waiting on many of the improvements that will take place over the next 2, 3, and 4 years as we continue to study and plan for and design those bigger improvements.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Sullivan. I work with GoTriangle and Go Durham. I just have a plug for some of the stuff we're also doing. Right now, Durham is in the middle of a short-range transit plan. It's actually open. We have several scenarios that are basically what does the future of Go Durham look like over the next 5 years that are available for comment right now. Orange County, Wake County are also in the middle of their short-range transit planning processes, and each of those are available to be looked at on their website. Durham is doing things like they just started bike share last Monday. There are all kinds of things that are in the works and that are planning that are looking at what you can do. We have carpool and vanpool options, all kinds of mobility things that we have a team working with to get teleworking into workplaces and to work with employers to get them to offer GoPass programs and other things to help people make that transition easier. We have so many different communication things that we're trying to push out to people so that they know what their options are, to prepare them so that they're ready to take advantage of these big plans that are happening right now. We just have to plug into them.
Yeah, I was going to say, just piggyback on Jeffrey's comment, Chapel Transit's also working on a short-range transit plan, but there's a lot of things going on operationally at the ground level to try to fix these day-to-day issues. UNC just started a bike share program a month ago. Our ridership and membership is through the roof already, so there's a huge demand out there for other sorts of alternatives to kind of get us around in a good way.
I'm just a little girl from Salisbury, North Carolina, but I did live in Toronto for 10 years, and so I can appreciate transit. What do you need us to do to change people's mindset? Because I think that's going to be a struggle. So I'm glad you're working with the large employers. What do you need from us as smaller employers to help people get on the bus?
So I would start by saying encourage folks to use it. I can tell you when folks use it, a lot of them continue to use it. And you may want to emphasize to people it's productive time. We have Wi-Fi on all our buses now, the GoTriangle network and Go Raleigh. And I can tell you when the Wi-Fi goes out, I hear about it. I mean, they'll find me. I mean, they don't just put in a complaint. Yeah, no, they'll email, they'll call, and the Wi-Fi was out for 5 minutes. So it's productive time. If you can encourage your employees to, instead of sitting in traffic for 45 minutes or an hour and 10 minutes, to bring their laptop, to ride the bus, to try it one time. And a lot of times they'll find out that their life has changed for the better. That instead of opening the laptop at 10 or 11 at night to get work done, they can have 45 minutes of productive time on a bus or less in both directions, and it allows them to spend their free time with their family, or sleeping, or whatever else they may want to do, as opposed to working at night because they sat in traffic all day. So I let them know it's out there, encourage them to use it the first time, and a lot of them will find out that it's a great service and enjoy using it and will continue to use it. And tell them, look, we value input. We're looking for input from citizens and businesses as to what the transit plan should look like. There are a lot of opportunities for input. We value that, and it helps shape the plan. So encourage them to speak up and to use transit.
And we also have a Go Pass program, so employers can pay for the pass for your employees, which we find is a huge motivator. If they don't have any cost in transportation, that's a huge encouragement to them actually using the system.
And can I add one more thing? Do not offer free parking. We do not, engineers and economists don't pay enough attention to the importance of parking. When we have free parking, we're going to drive there at the end. So by not offering free parking to your employees, you are really encouraging them to take transit.
And I would say on our communications and outreach side, we started a campaign about a year and a half ago now called Go Together, where we encourage people to share their transit rider stories. We use the hashtag Go Together on social media. We put together video stories. We find that our current riders are our best pitch people for the system and how it works and where it can go. And so I would encourage you, if you already are a transit user, to share your story with us on Twitter at GoTriangle. Any one of our transit partners here, send us your information. If you haven't tried it yet, I'd encourage everyone in this room who's never tried, go to any of our transit partners, GoTriangle, Go Raleigh, Go Durham. If you go on the main website, we all have the same shared trip planning tool. Plug in your address, where you work or where you go to school, see how possible it can be. A lot of people think transit is not a viable option for them right now until they go to that trip planning tool and plug in those 2 addresses and see how many options there are out there today.
And Mike, thanks for putting together such a great panel. I'm Karen Ringe with Wake Up, and I just wanted to say how pleased I am to hear about the research that you've done, Dr. Bardaka, and about transit and housing and TOD. And you're absolutely right. We've got this great opportunity with the Wake County Transit Plan and the Wake County Affordable Housing Plan for them to work together. And it's really going to take coordinated effort of all our municipalities, and not just the county, but all of our towns and our transit agencies to really see that those things work cohesively to plan for our growth. So thank you.
Okay, finally, I'd like to give a plug for the Go Perks program. If you are tracking your trips and you are taking transit, you can win and have an opportunity to win wonderful gift certificates on a monthly basis. So encourage your employees, or if you're tracking your trips, and that information helps us to provide information for our grant opportunities in the future. So we'd like to thank everyone on this panel, these very busy people. We have gotten some fantastic information this afternoon. Let's give them a hand. I'd like to really thank Mike Charbonneau for putting this panel together, our Director of Marketing. We have quite a few GoTriangle employees in the room. If you all just would like to raise your hand and say hello, because we are here in support. And we'd like to thank Thrive. This was a wonderful conference. Thank you.
I will say one thing. We recorded the session today, so we'll make sure we share it with Thrive so they can share it with all of you. So if you have employers, employees, community members you'd like to share this discussion with, we'll make sure everybody gets a link. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you. Pleasure. I'll give one up.